When I mention stealth games, what comes to mind? Is it Sam Fisher's acrobatic stealth infiltration? Solid Snake in his trusty cardboard box? Maybe it's Ezio's parkour-inspired movement, or even Agent 47's disguise-based infiltrations. Well, depending on your age, for many, it would actually be Solid Snake in his trusty box in Metal Gear. Only because it spawned a series which spanned generations. Yet, some may instead say Thief in the late 90s. Though, what if I were to tell you that the truth does not lie in any of those games? What if I told you that the very first steps made into this genre weren't taken by some specialist soldier, trained assassin, or even some medieval thief? Instead, they were taken by a young boy in a supermarket shoplifting while trying to avoid the store manager. Welcome to the obscure birth of a genre, stealth, where we peel back the layers of time, shadows, and look into the pioneers of the stealth genre. We'll be looking at the games that founded the ideas of stealth in games, up to the very game that truly defined the genre and even popularized it. 1979. To uncover the origin of this genre, we find ourselves traveling all the way back to 1979. This is before Pac-Man, before home consoles were a commonplace. We must travel straight to Japan and dive into their experimental world of Japanese home development. Our subject of focus is Mambiki Shonen, or, in America, Shoplifting Boy. This is not an arcade game, like you might think it is. However, it is in truth a forgotten artifact of gaming history. Shoplifting Boy was created by an independent hobbyist, Hiroshi Suzuki, for the Commodore PET 2001, an all-in-one home computer. This machine was akin to what you see in the Fallout universe: green monitor, blocky character-based graphics, though that's besides the point. Shoplifting Boy is a 16K program written in BASIC, and against all odds, it spawned an entire genre, which would then evolve over the decades into the entire stealth genre of video games we know and love today. Much like the English title, Shoplifting Boy sees you play as a young boy over a spy or super soldier behind enemy lines. The graphics depict a simple stick figure which must navigate an abstract storefront defined by PET or PETSCII characters. Of course, with a name like that, your goal is pretty simple: steal all of the money signs off of the shelves without being spotted by the manager. The store owner, however, patrols the aisles, aided by the earliest known usage of line-of-sight detection systems in gaming history. If spotted, the shoplifting boy will be hauled out of the store, and it is game over. Unlike prior games, this gameplay loop causes players to have a stop and observe their opponent carefully type system in an attempt to avoid being spotted by the manager. Now, unlike many games, this one did not get a commercial release. Instead, it was published in a Japanese magazine, RAM, in 1980. Of course, we all know that spells out RAM. It quickly became a ghost in the system type situation, which led it to quickly being forgotten. Yet, it survived in fragmented reports and later ports as a faint echo of the past. Yet, the effects of its influences were very prompt. Within the months, Taito, a Japanese arcade studio, took direct inspiration from Shoplifting Boy for their own commercial hit. Which brings us to the next part of our story. 1980. Lupin III is a popular multimedia franchise even back in the late 70s, and their license to their arcade games fell under Taito. Now, amid the RAM publication, it seems that Taito had discovered Mambiki Shonen, and they acted pretty quickly because they struck up a deal with Hiroshi Suzuki to adapt his stealth mechanics. Now, this was originally perceived to be a match made in heaven. Taito quickly realized that the mechanics meant less coin droppage, however, on their machines. Now, players were now encouraged to play slow and steady to win the game. Rushing would now result in a lose state. This was, of course, a financial conundrum for the arcade company, and ultimately the stealth mechanics of Mambiki Shonen were stripped down and made into a commercial commodity. Gameplay quickly became a mix of these chase mechanics and light stealth mechanics, where players were tasked with grabbing money bags and attempting to escape. Yet, the more they carried, the slower they moved, upping the difficulty significantly. Think of this as an early prototype to what would become Payday. Now, while Lupin III was not the complete stealth package, that didn't stop Suzuki, who also in 1980 went on to develop a sequel to Mambiki Shonen, Mambiki Shoujo, which, from my research, is just as much lost media as its older brother. From what I've gathered, Mambiki Shoujo was basically the exact same game as Shonen, albeit with slightly improved graphics and line-of-sight mechanics. 1981. Finally, in September of 1981, a legend is born with Castle Wolfenstein, a stealth action game which featured a castle which held 60 procedurally generated rooms to explore. The goal? Secure the war plans, unlock a new level of difficulty, and go again. Now, in Castle Wolfenstein, you're an allied spy captured by the Nazis and held in the dungeon of the castle. A dying prisoner gives you a handgun, 10 bullets, and 3 grenades before he dies. You must now escape by any means necessary. If you find the war plans, you'll get promoted and the game will become harder and harder every time you restart. Yet, while being a 2D top-down game on the Apple II, it had a surprising amount of depth that really wouldn't be seen again for decades. That depth held things like the ability to hold up guards, check them for items, steal disguises, as well as death states, which depending on how you died would change the castle layout. If you died in combat, the castle would remain the same, yet if you died from your own grenade, it would generate a new castle to explore. The game also featured in-game voices with guards actually speaking German. Yet, 1 month later, 005 came out and revolutionized the formula that started with Mambiki Shonen. Unlike Castle Wolfenstein, 005 was not a computer game and instead proved that the stealth-focused gameplay could in fact work on arcade machines, which of course proved Taito wrong. 005 introduced various features, which would be seen in games for generations to come. Let's dive into this a bit. 005 is of course another 2D arcade game. It featured an improved line of sight mechanic as a patrolling guard in a warehouse utilized a flashlight as their cone of vision. You would freely navigate the overworld, entering into ice rinks, warehouses, all in an attempt to find a briefcase and escape via helicopter, which would take you back out to infiltrate some more. The game maintains a bit of action, giving players a tranquilizer weapon which can be used to defend yourself. It also seems to have an alert phase mechanic, as when one guard spots you, immediately backup is called and the chase sequence will begin. 005, while it is an arcade game in today's world, it really set a precedent for how stealth games and games in general would continue introducing mechanics that built upon themselves. Now, in this sense, they introduced cones of vision, and that allowed the guards to fully see how far away you were from them. Now, of course, in this concept, with a hub world and its open level select menu, in game, this mechanic proved an epic success, if you would. Now, you could even pilot the helicopter in certain levels, which was again pretty interesting for the time. With such advanced mechanics early on, and how information had been lost and then of course later found, Sega found great success with 005, of course being a parody of 007 or 007. Due to everything, the Guinness World Record for first stealth video game ever goes to 005, cementing its significance in the history and the world, however, leaving Mambiki Shonen in the dark shadows of history. Now, while well-deserved for advancing the genre, it almost feels like a lie that's just been accepted with new information. Now, Regarding Mambiki Shonen, or even Castle Wolfenstein, which came out a month prior to 007, personally to me, I think that Guinness's World Records should set the record straight. Maybe give Mambiki Shonen the title. You know, 007 gets the world record for being the first stealth arcade video game, sure, but it's not the first stealth game. But that's besides the point. This is not what this video is about. 1984. 3 years had finally passed. No new stealth games were released during that time, seemingly, though the genre was not done yet. In 1984, Beyond Castle Wolfenstein was released in July. As a sequel, it did what all well-made sequels did at the time. It added new features and built off the previous game. Unlike Castle Wolfenstein, its sequel was true to its name as it went beyond the old castle, and this time it took place in a secret Nazi bunker where Hitler was conducting meetings. This time, instead of escaping a prison and stealing documents on your way out, you were instead tasked with locating a bomb hidden by the Allied forces, planting it in Hitler's meeting room, and then escaping. Once again, procedural levels return, so every playthrough was different. Yet, this time new mechanics were added. One change was the removal of grenades in favor of a dagger, which, well, it's kind of obvious. Instead of blowing your way through enemies, you could now silently kill your enemies. Now you could drag bodies, and over them just vanishing, this feature allowed you to have a deeper experience and even use the bodies to block passageways. And yes, you could in fact use the bodies to reach new areas. A pass system was implemented where officers would call you in on certain levels to check your credentials. Here you could bribe them or simply supply the documents if you had the time to actually find them. Failing to do this would get you shot on sight and was a major improvement as it made the need for exploration more essential to pass the game, as well as providing a non-lethal option to get through the bunker. Failing the check would also initiate an alert system, which would summon a bunker-wide search for the player. These games, in conclusion, sees you plant the bomb, assassinate Hitler, and escape to a high-resolution cutscene of the bunker exploding in the foreground. A scene we will see replicated much, much later. Now, Beyond Castle Wolfenstein created more in-depth mechanics, which would shape the genre for even longer than priorly thought. This further cemented the stealth genre in ways which made the gameplay more viable in the long term and far more interesting. This caused players to think more about their actions over just running around, shooting bad guys, and hiding until it was just safe to go about your day. 1985. In 1985, Clive Townsend created a game about an anonymous ninja tasked with infiltrating a warehouse to steal a floppy disk. For those that don't know what a floppy disk is, it is in fact the known predecessor to the CD. If you want more information, just Google it. This floppy disk contained information about a rebel leader. This 8-bit game was released on home computer formats and had you navigating various places such as warehouses, dark tunnels, and of course, the secret command center. Clive substituted out the typical life format for an energy bar, one which constituted not just your health but also your stamina. This energy bar would be depleted when underwater, falling from great heights, or being hurt, and to replenish it, all you had to do was stand still in a safe place. Of course, just resting and letting your natural regeneration occur. The Saboteur begins the game with one single shuriken for a weapon. However, the game puts a higher incentive on the fact that your body is the weapon. Players can punch, dropkick, pick up junk, and fight with it, leading to a procure on-site weapon system. Yet players are still disadvantaged as guards can also fight hand-to-hand as well as were armed with actual guns and would chase the player if spotted or heard them from being too loud. Not to mention the fact that they had guard dogs for added assistance, things like turns and advanced security systems to impede the player. Now, within this game, Clive put in a difficulty selection which made the game more accessible or difficult depending on the player's skill or preferences. Now, this impacted the amount of enemies on watch, increased or decreased your time limit, or how easy the final escape would be. Oh, did I also mention that this game has a time limit? Well, because you didn't mishear me. You have a limited amount of time to complete your mission and escape, or it is game over. This added level of stress really drives home the need for precise action and careful stealth. From crouching, climbing, running, and your attacks, every action has weight behind it, which would determine a fail state or a victory state based on your actions and skill alone. Saboteur was based on a prior project that was cancelled prior to the development because it was a project which was prior. Of course, the prior development was starting on Saboteur priorly. There they took routines as well as ideas from the cancelled Death Pit game and used it to create an impressive take on the stealth genre in only 8 bits. 1986. Infiltrator is a combat fight simulator where players took on the role of a jack-of-all-trades hero named Johnny Jimbo Baby McGibbets, who is tasked with the mission of taking down a mad leader in his helicopter. Now, you're probably saying this right now. That does not sound much like a stealth video game. Well, I kinda agree. However, the game is in fact 50% combat flight simulator, and the other 50% is stealth-based infiltration game. Yes, you heard me right. Infiltrator has 6 missions. Missions 1, 3, and 5 are your flight simulation, and that entails that you need to, of course, take off aircraft, enter into dogfights before landing at the target locations. Missions 2, 4, 6 see Jimbo leave his helicopter to infiltrate the Mad Leader's bases. Now, leaving behind your well-armed helicopter, you'll find that Jimbo has 5 items in their inventory: papers, gas canister, gas grenades, mine detector, and explosives. The papers are forged to state that Jimbo is working for the Mad Leader, while it's obvious the gas items are tranquilizers, and everything else I feel is kind of self-explanatory. Now, as Jimbo, you will infiltrate 3 facilities with a goal to find a security card to open security gates. This will allow you to reach your final objective. In Mission 2, you must locate several chemical containers, take them to a lab, analyze them, then find the neutralizing agent to destroy them. Mission 4 sees you infiltrating another base with the goal to rescue a scientist who's been forced to work on the project for the Mad Leader. Now, this helping him will have him give you an invisibility pill to have him escape with you. Finally, the 6th mission sees you having to find 7 different missile control rooms, plant explosives to destroy them, then escape within 10 minutes of in-game time, which is the equivalent to 20 real-world minutes. You must then fly back home with fewer enemies in the skies, having foiled the Mad Leader's nefarious plans. Now, upon completion, the game then rewards you with the ability to enter a passcode to return to the same mission during your next play, which isn't much of a reward as giving players some cool item or anything to be used in future playthroughs that would alter gameplay, in my opinion, or having even procedural infiltration levels like the Wolfenstein games up to this point. However, needless to say, this game took America by storm and was an extremely popular game in the States. 1987. It is now 1987, and there have been only 8 games created which focused on stealth as the main mechanic. And while some were popular, none actually cemented the genre itself. Yet, in this year, everything changed. All prior games were made to be essentially prototypes for the true culmination that was about to occur. In 1986, a 23-year-old Hideo Kojima was tasked with making a military action game set to debut on the MSX2, an 8-bit home computer system. Hideo Kojima had just wrapped up work on an extremely ambitious sequel to Antarctic Adventure, known as Penguin Adventure, and he had demonstrated an interest in systems designs that transcended what simple arcade projects was. A young Kojima attempted to then disguise a game titled Lost World. World? W-A-R-L-D. World. Which was, of course, cancelled for being too complex to run on the MSX system. Yet he turned that failure into a lesson, as it taught him how to balance his ambitious ideas with the technical reality he was in. This, of course, setting the stage for what was soon to come. Metal Gear was released on July 13th of 1987 and was the direct product of creative necessity born from technical weakness. Kojima's original assignment was just a military action title, which ran into immediate problems due to the MSX2 computer only being able to render a handful of enemy sprites, which, of course, was game-breaking. So, Kojima took a step back, created an ingenious solution, flipped the script on military action games entirely. The era was already full of run-and-gun games like Commando, Robotron, Operation Wolf, and even Konami's own games like Contra and Rush in Attack. Kojima's solution saw a change from the push to attack and instead challenged players to avoid detection entirely. Combat was still there, of course, though it was no longer the main focus. Instead, it was the fail state. The technical constraints of the MSX2 forced Kojima into creating an entirely new genre, one which shifted the focus and reflexes to cunning and timing, the stealth genre as we know it today. While the origins of the genre predate Kojima and Metal Gear, it was Metal Gear who popularized the genre itself, polished it, and essentially finalized what the genre was about when everything came together. Thus why Metal Gear may not be the first stealth game, though it is the game that made the genre whole. On top of everything, the espionage core loop was layered with a foundation that was full of cinematic ambition. The story: infiltrate outer heaven in South Africa, neutralize a nuclear robot known as Metal Gear. You are Solid Snake, and you will face trial and error over and over again as you navigate the base, solve its puzzles, and get equipment necessary to survive, and of course win against the base commander. The narrative was steeped in Cold War paranoia and spy thrillers of the time. The core dynamic was slow and methodical evasion, essentially a game of hide and seek, which of course was inspired by films like The Great Escape and Escape from New York, the latter being where the main character's alias came from, Snake. Though, the true evolution which took stealth mechanics just from stealth mechanics into a full-blown genre was seen in how Metal Gear implemented them. Kojima had explicit rules set for stealth, such as you were immediately recognizable to guards. Being spotted started an alert phase. If you broke their line of sight, you'd enter into the invasion phase. And so, as long as you remained hidden, it would then return back to your normal phase, and you could continue your mission in peace. By creating a game where your success was defined by what you avoided, Metal Gear codified stealth into everything. It was that good. It provided foundational blueprint for future games in the genre, from detection phases, cinematic scope to its narrative. Every game that followed took a good long look at what Metal Gear had done, cementing the genre's DNA for generations to come. Yet, Metal Gear on the MSX2 wasn't the only game which Konami released in 1987. No, actually, they released Metal Gear twice in 1 year. No, I'm not joking. That is not me joking, trust me. I'm going to resume using my normal voice now. Metal Gear on the NES, published by Ultra Games, was what Lupin III was to Mambiki Shonen. It, while still a stealth game, was not developed or directed by Kojima and instead by a separate team. Much of the core design was lost and diluted down, and various mechanics were dumbed down or even removed completely. Alert phases took a real hit here. The entire premise of the game was cut, removing the namesake weapon, Metal Gear, from the game, and instead replaced it with, is that right? A computer? Players now started in a jungle over inside of the base itself. Cigarettes were dumbed down entirely to be a contextual item over something which actually could benefit the player from being used, reducing the depth of the game itself. As they were originally the only item dumbed down, the game suffered from poor programming and optimization on the NES, leading Westerners to think that the game was just a clumsy attempt at an action game. Now, this led to two different camps of players. One game with two different souls. One, a masterpiece that defined the genre as a whole, while the other, a clumsy attempt that diminished the story and mechanics. 1988. After the success of Metal Gear, stealth did not slow down in the late 80s. Instead, we got to see the rise of a tactical team-based stealth game known as Hostages, or Rescue the Embassy mission, which players took control of a team of commandos who must infiltrate an embassy and complete an objective. Hostages took a more realistic approach, using a real-world scenario set in modern day. There weren't no big robots, no incursions, no Nazi castle. There was no stealing from a warehouse. Instead, you had to lead multiple teams to handle a terrorist attack on an embassy and successfully rescue any hostages held within. Of course, this kind of sounds like today's version of Rainbow Six's hostage mode. Now, Hostages is divided into three sections. First is a stealth-heavy section where you must get your team into a building designated for your sniper's vantage point. You'll move each individual team member into place, carefully avoiding terrorist spotlights by ducking behind cover, rolling, crawling, and even diving with careful timing to avoid being spotted. Finally, you get to the second segment where you resume control over the sniper division of the team, where the game quickly moves away from the stealth and into the shooting gallery type of game. Now, as you take out your enemies in preparation for the full assault, the third section sees you assume control of a repelling agent armed with a submachine gun entering through a chosen floor window. That agent will then assume two different cameras, first person in the hallways, and a third person when in rooms. Here, as the operative moves from room to room, the snipers can then be used as support for rooms they can see into. Now, upon finding a hostage, they would follow you to safety, though some ports required you to take them to a safe room instead, where they would be rescued. The third section, however, only ends when all terrorists are killed and all the hostages have been secured. The win state sees the evaluation of your efforts displayed in a newspaper excerpt, while it will detail out your actions and if you actually succeeded or did not succeed. Essentially, this is the first game in this tactical SWAT style, and would probably also be a good starting point when talking about the tactical team shooter genre one day, because like I mentioned before, this really laid the foundations for SWAT games and even Rainbow Six games. For the most modern example is what I gave earlier, Rainbow Six's Siege, which has a hostage mode, but is a multiplayer variant. But anyway, we're not talking about that right now. 1990. Due to the success of Metal Gear, Konami wanted to capitalize on the brand in the West, which led to a strange situation. Without Kojima's knowledge, they developed Snake's Revenge, Metal Gear 2, for the NES, a game meant solely to capitalize on the success of the overseas port. At the time, Kojima, protective of his creation, then began working on his one true sequel, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, releasing only in Japan. This created two very different games, two souls for one brand. The Western version was an attempt to be a stealth game, but again completely missed the point. While it kept the core top-down infiltration, it forced in a new side-scroll and action segment. These sections, inspired by games like Rush and Attack, abandoned stealth entirely in favor of stiff, run-and-gun combat. This diluted the central gameplay gameplay loop and made it feel more like a clumsy action game. Even in the top-down sections, the stealth mechanics were regressive. The alert system was present, but it was less about evasion and more just about surviving a firefight. The game's design often made it feel like you were better off just going in guns blazing, which directly contradicted the very foundation of the genre that Metal Gear had solidified. It was a step back, and a game that left Western audiences confused about what the series was, and by extension, what the genre was supposed to be. Meanwhile, Kojima was taking everything that worked in the first game and perfecting it. Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake was the true evolution of stealth. The story was a high-stakes rescue mission in a country known as Zanzibar Land, but the real magic was in the gameplay. It featured smarter enemies, as in guards weren't just simple pixels anymore. They could now see in a 45-degree cone of vision, move their heads, and even patrol across multiple screens. They could also hear the sounds you made, forcing you to be even more careful than you were before. It expanded your movement. Now Snake could finally crawl. This wasn't just for show. It let him hide under desks, in air ducts, and even pick up landmines. It introduced the tactical radar. A new radar was a game changer. It now showed you a 3x3 grid of your immediate area, giving you a chance to plan your movements to avoid your detections. Now, this sequel took the raw ideas of the first game and created a polished, complete experience. While Snake's Revenge was a clumsy cash grab, Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake was the true masterpiece that cemented the genre's DNA for decades to come. The end. It's upon us. From the humble beginnings of Mambiki Shonen to the genre-defining culmination that was the Metal Gear franchise becoming what it is, we can see a very clear lineage. The stealth genre has defined not just itself, but also future games. What started as a simple mechanic of avoiding detection is now seen in almost every type of action game, from Call of Duty to even some platformers. While the genre may have evolved, its influence is not going anywhere anytime soon. So, that's actually the obscure origin of the stealth genre. This leaves me with one question for all of you. What is your favorite stealth game? I'd love to hear which game, born from this history, defines your understanding of the genre. Now, this would of course be where I say this is Protector Cross signing off, but this is my first video in a long time. I appreciate you all stopping in to give it a listen. I hope you enjoyed it. If you notice a difference, I do have a new mic, so hopefully videos in the future will be of a higher quality standard. Bear with me if there's any issues in the audio, as it's a learning process with this new technology. Now, this is Protector Cross, and this time I am signing off. Good day, good night, and have a good life.